Hi, welcome to the supplement to the main message for November the 8th. So, this is not the message. This is a little bit for those who would like to find out and explore the Bible background somewhat. So, that's what I'm intending to share with you. So, you'll need, if you haven't got it with you, go and get a Bible or do a search engine and get to it. And while some people are doing that, let me just tell you that I was traveling on a bus. It was in Honduras after 3 days in the jungle bird watching. I was just itching for a shower, quite literally, longing for a bed to sleep in. And I'd found my way onto these buses which were transporting workers from the pineapple fields on the edge of the forest back to town for the night. So I got on one of these, and all went well. And I was sort of just trying to um, learn lessons about the people I was travelling with. They were very poor, very oppressed by their working circumstances. They worked for a supplier to one of the biggest international food organisations. You'll almost certainly have eaten their canned pineapple. Anyway, these are the guys who made that possible. And many of them had naturally and understandably managed to secure a pineapple tucked away in a t-shirt or in a lunch bag or whatever it was they could. On the bus that I was on, just a little ahead of me, was a security guard from one of the plantations. He noticed somebody trying to take a pineapple home, and he decided it was his job to remove it from, confiscate it. Well, they put up a bit of a fight, and in the end, he went to his belt and drew out what I would call a machete. You'd probably call it a machete, um, an agricultural instrument, and went for this guy. Apparently, it looked like he was going to go for the throat, and happily enough, people intervened quickly, and the matter was resolved by other means. And the person actually ended up keeping their pineapple, which didn't appeal to the security guard, but he was very outnumbered. And there were loads of lessons for me about what that you can only learn among people who really are at the poor end of life and struggling for a living, and where all too easily the weapons of the implements of daily earning a living can become the weapons of harm and hurt. And how great it is when it happens the other way around. And I've got dozens of examples of that, but I don't have time to share them with you. So I'll just mention one this week that came to my attention: the use in the UK of the army to open a coronavirus testing centre in Liverpool. And because it's going to aim to test the entire population, it's a very big undertaking in logistically. So the army have been brought in to manage those logistics. And it's just a great example of how what's been prepared and trained for warfare can actually also be retasked to heal and to bring about good and help to people. And I love those kinds of things because it brings to me this picture from Isaiah. In Isaiah's dream and his vision, he talks about what he sees in his mind, and he sees the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem being elevated and becoming prominent, and an international centre for people to meet God, and people pour in from all over the world. They learn God's ways and then they go home with God's ways. They allow God to settle the arguments instead of warfare and other means, and the result is peace. And nobody needs to train for war anymore. And Isaiah just pops this into. Isaiah's a big book, falls at least into two sections, possibly three. And it covers a vast, actually, period of time as well. And this particular little nugget is interesting, partly because it seems almost out of place in the first part of Isaiah. It's got that feel to it which really belongs. It makes you think, well, that feels like it would be more natural at the end. It seems to break the flow at the beginning. But I think what it succeeds in doing by being put there is it gives us like a foretaste of the promises and the visions to come. Isaiah's about to share a lot of bad news, and it's really nice to have this little sort of nugget of positivity and of great hope. It's not the only time that the text does that, just to sort of relieve some of the rather bleaker stuff. So I think that's probably what it's doing there. I don't really know. Micah has exactly the same passage. So you've got two books of the Bible and exactly the same passage. So I don't know whether Micah pinched it from Isaiah or Isaiah pinched it from Micah, or they both used a different source and both decided to quote it. My money is on Micah pinching it from Isaiah, but the votes haven't all been counted yet, so I don't know. It just has to remain an open question. Somehow it's there, and it's a beautiful, beautiful picture that Isaiah is keen to share with us. The clear lesson, I mean, it's a big promise, but the clear lesson of it is, look, when we come to God and let God teach us, and then we go and apply those teachings and that instruction that God has for us in his word, then disputes can be resolved by non-violent means, and we will have a different approach to living in the world. And it's a dream, says Isaiah, that I hold out to you, for you to aspire to and want to be part of. And it's a dream which I'm telling you is actually one day going to fill the earth. It's actually going to be what happens. It's full of images, it's a picture, it's a dream, but the principle that he's trying to share about God's kingdom will one day fill the earth. That's his message to us. Well, roll forward to a good while later, and the life and teaching of Jesus given to us in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13 is a whole sort of scoopful of Jesus's teachings on the kingdom of God, God's reign, what God has to say and what it means to follow doing things God's way. And so Matthew's collected a whole bunch of them together in chapter 13, and it's brilliant. It's lovely because it's like a whole hodgepodge of different angles on the kingdom. So let's take two of those angles, and they follow one upon another. Thank you, Anne, for reading them to us. And they are, so first of all, first of those parables that I'm focusing on today is at verse 24 of Matthew 13, often called the parable of the tares, for the old English word for a plant you don't want to grow somewhere, or weeds, the modern English plant or name for plants that may be growing improperly in some sense. So that's a parable about that. Anyway, the plot is this guy has planted his fields, he's sown proper seed wheat in it, and therefore everybody expects a really nice looking field. But actually what happens when all the seed germinates, the plants grow up, and the place is full of all kinds of other stuff. And people go, so what's happened? And he says, well, I think an enemy's come along when I wasn't looking and planted some bad seed in my field. And they said, well, so let's get in there and pull out those plants. And the farmer takes a very interesting choice. It's, by the way, it's not the likely agricultural practice. Jesus isn't teaching agriculture here. And it's rather surprising all round, actually. He goes, nah, leave it. You'll actually cause more harm than good by fixing it now. There's a time, we'll fix it when the harvest comes, and we'll sort it then, and that'll be better. So we can look at the world as if it was a field full of the bad stuff, the wrong things growing in it, the wrong things happening in it. And we can worry about the good things and go, well, they're being overwhelmed by all this other stuff. shouldn't we fix it? And more importantly, God, why are you leaving it? And God saying, because I can see when to fix it to the best effect. And that's when we'll have the grand totaling out, and we will in fact remove all the harmful stuff, all the violence, all the greed, all the hatred, all the distrust, all of this, all of that. We will be done with it, but that moment has not come. Meanwhile, then, we're left feeling, well, yeah, but the good stuff just seems overwhelmed. So Jesus goes on to these other two parables. One about a farmer, again, a farmer taking, this is also very unlikely, and that's why it gets their attention probably, takes a single mustard seed, they're kind of what we translate as mustard, a tiny, tiny, tiny seed, and plants it in the middle of a field, as if that makes good sense. But actually it turns out that it grows into a substantial shrub, which everybody knew it would if it succeeded. And suddenly it's a dominant thing, suddenly it's a big thing, and suddenly more has come of this tiny beginning than you expected. And in a similar way, a woman has taken some yeast and put it into some dough. She's baking for about 100 people, but she hasn't needed to use much yeast to achieve a great goal. And the message clearly is something to do with, you can read them for yourself and ponder the different meanings. Don't be too alarmed by the fact that your efforts to live a faithful life seem puny. Don't give up just because so much in the world seems to be going wrong. And sure enough, it does, doesn't it? Don't despair, but actually keep faithful. Be the mustard seed and the yeast thing happening in the world. So it's a little bit of a rebalance from the field image, which is not sit back and do nothing, but do what you can do and understand that it may seem small to you, but it's not small. It's part of an end result that's epic, and the end result will flow directly out of the small beginnings that are happening right now as you and I and others seek to serve the ways of the kingdom. After all, at the time of his crucifixion, Jesus had probably less than 500 active followers, probably a lot less. That at that point, the point of crucifying him was that those who held the empire power or were allies of that power or hoped to use that power for their own good, they wanted him out of the way, crushed and gone. They'd be so surprised that 2,000 years later, he's not followed by 2, 3, 4, 500 people, but by millions. That's not what they crucified him for. But God thought, hey, it's not going to stay crucified, it's not going to stay dead, because my kingdom does not get overwhelmed by the forces of the world, even those of the greatest empires. I'm bigger than that, and I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm waiting, and I know why I don't mind working in the small ways for a huge result. You and I, folks, we are just small people, and history won't notice us, but we can be part of that working of God's kingdom. So don't miss your opportunities this week to do that. Do take a look back at the rest of Matthew 13, by the way, and get some other angles on what God's kingdom is like in the teaching of Jesus. God's reign, doing things the way God likes them done. That's the nature of our business. God bless you in it as you take part in some way. Never forget that you belong to something wonderful. And may the Lord keep you safe and well and shining this week. See you next time.